Welcome to another edition of Meet the Solutionaries on greentv.com. Very pleased and grateful to have our next guest. I'm speaking with Alice Day, and she made the film again along with her late husband Lincoln, called Scarred Lands and Wounded Lives: The Environmental Footprint of War. And this is a lesser known subject area, not focused on very often, and certainly in the heat of war, the fog of war, it's not the first thing that most people think about, but it certainly is a huge problem, especially after the war ends, or we finally, or somebody gets out, the invader gets out of the country, like in Afghanistan. So much of the munitions and weapons, ordnance, I guess they call it in military terms, is left behind. Sometimes undetonated explosive devices. It's terrible for the climate, all the burning of stuff. And of course, now we have the added threat of nuclear waste or fallout because of the fires burning near Chernobyl. So without further ado, thank you so much for making this film, for having the foresight to really focus in on something that I'm sure was difficult to do, but so important and not very often, have I seen this subject explored. And I haven't seen the full film yet, but seeing the excerpts, I can highly recommend it. It's all too relevant today. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your interest in the film, and particularly now. I certainly think it's very relevant and important to think in terms of the destruction of the environment as well as people at this time.
And this came out of what you saw, you and your husband, happening with the Iraq War in terms of impact on the environment, and of course, people living in the environment.
Well, we didn't exactly see it in the Iraq War, but we had been interested in the environment for a long time. And we felt that it was very important to bring up war as one of the major disruptors of the environment in our time. And tends not to be recorded or put into documentaries, and people don't exactly enjoy seeing it because it gives you a sense of moral responsibility that our country is doing this to the environment. So it's a difficult film to market after it was made, although there was a lot of interest in it.
I'm glad to hear that. One of the participants in your film said environment is the silent casualty of war. And while it's certainly not talked about enough, there's certainly plenty to see in terms of scarred lands, to use part of the title of your documentary. I didn't realize that there was no real responsibility for us to clean up the mess we make in Iraq and Afghanistan. Is that, I don't know if you can call anything in the aftermath of war typical, but is that common? I mean, I guess we just assume that at some point it is cleared up, but we should know better, because even Princess Diana's work with, mines that were dangerous still to the people left behind in Vietnam and all the way through, recently in Afghanistan.
The mines are a terrible thing to leave behind because they're totally unseen. And they lie where they were put in all the time until they're actually blown up. And children can be victims of mines because they don't expect it to happen and so on. But one of the people in our film, General Guard, had a very explicit way of describing it. He said, if there were mines in a field, you would not want to make one step over that field because it was almost certain to be blown up if you did that. So yes, that's another silent casualty, isn't it? The fact that these things are left around and they affect not just the people who were there for the combat, but future generations and the land itself. So that in a sense, the land cannot be used because there's that ever-present danger associated with it. So one of the very troubling things that happens with war is that it increases the number of what they call sacrifice zones. And that is zones that are just have to be laid aside and not used, thought about in any kind of productive, creative way. but just left alone because they're so dangerous to life.
I can't imagine how many amputees there are, even from post-war.
Yes, exactly. Terrible.
And whose responsibility should it be? It would seem ours, where we have invaded other countries. And is that assumed it just doesn't happen? Is that dictated by anyone? It just doesn't happen? Or is it no one's really ever talked about it, thought about it? And has there been any repercussions? Obviously, the people left behind, but anyone getting mad at the military for that?
Well, I think it's all the things you mentioned, actually. But the Iraq War is an example of it. And one of the things that we did was to develop 5 actually short films from 4 to 7 minutes long, taking up different aspects of the whole picture, because we tried to do the whole picture to some extent in the film. And the smaller ones take up certain aspects of it. So we have one film called What We Left Behind in Iraq, and we explore the questions you were just raising. Who is responsible? Why does it happen? How much is it? How does it affect the populations that are living in the area? And it's everything from razor wire to vehicles that are no longer any use to anybody, just left in the environment, for people to climb over maybe, but ugly and potentially dangerous. So I think that no one really feels responsible enough to spend the time to do it. I think time is such a big issue for all these things. And time is very costly as well. And it doesn't get done because of time and because of cost and because nobody has really looked at who is responsible for this.
Alice, one of the issues that most people don't think about is what happens to, the environments, the habitats that are impacted by war, and the animals and, the flora and the fauna that, is part of the web of life. And when that is interrupted, that can really cause consequences that I'm sure most humans don't ever think about, including those who were unfortunate enough to be fighting a war.
Well, quite so. It's a big topic and quite challenging to represent. But there's a piece in our film that is given by a veteran of the Iraq War. And he talks about coming back to civilization, so to speak. And he has learned so much. And he says there's more life in a piece of soil than you can possibly imagine. We think of the big animals, the polar bears, and they're affected by climate change, and the lions and smaller animals as well. But you don't think of what's inside a piece of soil, all the various things going on that contribute to the richness of the soil and to the health of the environment. And just think of what a tank will do to a yard, a farm, the land that it goes over. And these things are so heavy. And then the weapons that go with them. So it's huge. The ecological effects are huge. And I think if we think past some of the things that we tend to treasure most, maybe, to the whole interconnection between the lives that are being lost, that we have a better idea of the total damage that war is doing.
Can you believe in 2022, in your lifetime, I'm sure you've seen a few wars, that we haven't learned much, if anything, especially coming out of a 2-year pandemic, where if nothing else, the takeaway message ought to be the preciousness of life and how quickly things can change, and that we're a small world, interconnected, because at one point the whole world kind of came to a standstill and stayed home. Whoever thought that could happen? And yet here we're seeing, men fighting, killing. Of course, there's one monster at the top of this one, and it's so devastating on so many levels. But we're trying to preserve life, and to see death happening intentionally, in this case for absolutely no reason. My commentary, but you probably agree. It's just it's almost beyond belief. And yet I do want to think about the environmental impacts and climate change, because you see these fires burning and you see things, burning up and blowing up. And that can't be good for just the immediate air quality, the pollution, of course, but it also is going to have an adverse impact on climate change, which is so critical right now. And to have this, unnecessary addition, of greenhouse gases at a time when it just makes so little sense. I'm sure you.
I think when we think about Iraq, if we apply some of the ideas we're talking about here, it makes you shudder and close your eyes and tremble, because what they're doing to that country, not just to buildings, not just to people, but to what's being left behind with every explosion, and with every sort of interaction between a heavy piece of equipment and putting it into practice so that it's killing other people. There's the remnants of that transaction that is affecting the environment. And Ukraine isn't that big a country, and having this going on is just sacrificing a country and an area in a terrible way that has somebody should absolutely be responsible for. And we should think about it that way, because we are one planet, we are one community, and we need every bit of space that we have for the people who are here now. And so we have these 4 or 5 short films, and the last one is that we need to forge a new ethic and think about the environment the way, in the terms that we're talking about, is something that with every action that we make, we should think of what is happening to the environment and ecosystems as a result of that.
That's what we focus on Green TV Solutions. And I want to get to a little bit more of that. But first, a few more points I'd like your thoughts on. How concerned are you about what's happening with the nuclear energy plants there?
My goodness, that's the most dangerous thing of all. And that's where we're talking about the unthinkable is becoming thinkable, because Putin is talking about using it if he gets pushed too far. And in the past, nobody has dared ever say that, because they understand really what nuclear does and how many people are killed, and the leftovers of nuclear are so toxic that the sacrifice zones are enormous. So my husband and I belong to and work very hard with a group called the Council for a Livable World, whose mission is to try to end the use of nuclear weapons. And now they have so much more work to do. And I urge everybody to have a look at that and think about it, because we need to, as a human species and species that should be responsible to other living things as well, because they're all under threat.
At this moment, about a month into this unwarranted war, it's hard to imagine how it will end. And God forbid, if the worst happens, then I guess even climate change won't matter, God forbid. But Putin's not going to come in and clean it up. So thinking of the Ukrainian people having to rebuild, I mean, there's whole buildings just bombed out. I mean, Mariupol and parts of, the other cities, Lviv, Kiev, it's, and what they're not showing on television, that's where most of the reporters happen to be. It's like, it's going to take a lot of resources to rebuild perfectly good buildings, just that alone.
We watching what's happening to Ukraine have so much admiration for the people and so much grief for the what they're going through, for their children, for their older parents, for the country itself, the beautiful buildings they had, that I think we should be responsible for helping them to rebuild, very much so, and make of it something positive, something that where we build a new type of building that's more environmentally sustainable than what was there. If we can think of something positive, if we can possibly think of anything positive about the rebuilding, that could be built into the way we think about the future after the war.
I
And I
think
hope
we should
that's
get over
what.
there, Alice, and lead that up. I think that's a brilliant idea. It's sort of like in the wake of these terrible floods and hurricanes and tornadoes, you know, if there's any silver lining, it's that they're realizing, hopefully, poor Louisiana keeps getting hit hard again and again, that they have to make their homes, if they're not going to move the location, a lot more weatherproof.
Right, yes, and that same type of attitude toward rebuilding. So
Right.
certainly should be applied to Ukraine.
But of course, so many of these areas.
Ukraine is becoming a model for a model war that was absolutely unnecessary. It was just an imperial power drive that is something almost new, and a war is awful. But this one is something a little different. And I hope when it's over that we can do something different with the remains as well.
One of the things I and others hope, of course, is that the silver green lining in this awful situation is that people realize the cost of being addicted to oil, that Putin has so much power in other, you know, petro states, countries that have, you know, kind of informed the geopolitical lines and how that's shifting. And it is good to see, you know, so many countries coming together against Putin as they should. And perhaps this will be the wake-up call that the world needed, that if we don't make a really quick transition as fast as possible and as wide and deep as possible to renewable energy, we're going to see more of this. And in a more and more dangerous world, if it's not, you know, from extreme weather events, from nuclear weapons, this has got to be a priority.
Yeah, it is a priority. And I think there's a lot of discussion that needs to take place about this kind of new ethic, and a lot of conversation about it. But also, I hope that there will be some way of making the Russians realize what they're doing in the name of their country. Because there is a lot of pushback in Russia, and the Russian people, about doing this to Ukraine. And people who had friends they can get in touch with and somehow get the picture over, that this is just, they're becoming a pariah, the country. And no country wants that. And they should make it clear, and also make clear the support they have from our country for helping them to get out of this somehow.
And so many Russians have relatives in Ukraine. It's not like this is a faraway foreign country. These are the same people. We're all human, and that's why this is so insane.
Yeah. I think there are people here who have people they can get in touch with and get something going of that sort, help them in their movement against it, which is big. But of course, the punishments for doing this there are so terrible. You can understand why more people aren't in the streets. It's dreadful.
Some of the words I heard in your material that struck me: environmental peace building. And I have long said, and I'm sure you too, and many other environmentally minded people, you know, this should be the cause that unites the whole world. Climate change is the only common enemy we have. And to not be fighting that, and this is, you know, among the other bits of fallout, not so small, is the diversion of attention to resources. Just when climate change, it seems like just when we are finally getting to the top of the news agenda, something major like a pandemic, you know, and now this will kind of just push it off the stage. And so many, and there's call, you know, by a certain party in this country, drill more, drill baby drill, and we need to start producing more, and we can't worry about climate change now. And these are people who are all too happy to not think about the impacts of climate change. It's just so terrible. So many.
It's very hard to get a balance. For it's all very well for us to talk about this, but for countries that really rely on Russian oil and fossil fuels, it's very difficult to balance the thing out.
And it enables, you know, and sort of just leads to Putin's feeling like he's, you know, somehow above it all. And can get away with this because he knows that there's a dependency here. And it seems like oil is
Right.
not directly in the middle of a lot of our wars, certainly Iraq, it's indirectly. And this, I guess, is one of those complicated, indirect, but definite factors in this situation. So before we let you go, is there anything I haven't asked you about that you would like to share? And also, most importantly, how can our viewers see the film?
We have a website. It's called scarredlandsfilm.com. It's a beautiful website. You can see the 5 shorts. You can see the whole film. You have to give your name and a few things about you to get that opened up, but it's
Well worth
there.
it. Well worth it. You don't have spam. I can say I already signed up.
I think it's extremely informative, and it's talking about restoring the earth, using a film like ours to restore the planet, as well as learn more about the evils of war, and it's war being the the environment being the silent casualty. I think that is a very good way to put it. So I would advise you to go to do that. And to think about ways you can support the Russian people to gather up enough strength and protest strength to make Putin feel that he's gone far enough, too far, actually.
Yeah, and it's that fine line. We don't want to put him in a corner too fast or too obviously. Because what might he do? It's like, it's an impossible situation. That's why I can't even imagine how this thing is going to end. It must. And at least the whole world is against him because of his total disregard for the sanctity of life. Evidence all too clearly every day. Well, Alice Day, I want to thank you for enlightening our day.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and for all of you out there. Hold your breath and do whatever you can to help the Ukrainians and keep us out of war.
Thank you so much. We will definitely put a link up to whatever you can share on our website at greentv.com. I want to thank Alice and also all of our viewers for tuning in for this really interesting, important, and not very much discussed aspect of the environment and of war, which unfortunately we are seeing unfold, shockingly enough, here in 2022. And please tell your friends and relatives about Green TV. The sooner we get 1,000 subscribers, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. The sooner we can start live streaming, and then our editor, Christine Weiss, can work on other things, because we'll just be putting it out live and we'll get a lot more content on, and a lot more wonderful, informative solutionaries like you, Alice Day. Thanks so much.
So much.